Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, Tuesday morning here in the eastern part of the U.S. Welcome to this Dev Talk Show. My name is Rich Ross, and I'm going to fly solo today. Thought we hadn't been on stream for a few days, and I was sitting here writing some code, and unfortunately, Chris has some things he's needing to work on, keeps him away from joining me. So I thought, hey, let's just turn on the live stream and write some code together. So hopefully, feel free to ask questions. Let's keep things going in the chat. Love to hear from you, where you're watching from, and just questions you might have as we go through this. I'm going to continue working on the app that we've been building for the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks at this point, called Hello DallE, which is taking a bunch of questions and moving those, taking the answers to those questions, sending them off to generative AI to create an image for us. And now that we have that image, I want to be able to persist that and keep that around for a little while. So there's a couple things I want to do to kind of make that happen. One of those is see if we can store that in Blob storage, which should be a relatively easy thing for us to do. So that's what we're going to start with. As I'd like to kind of do to kind of kick things off, let me see if I can share my screen here. It's this one. Awesome. So, looks like my screen is coming through. Let's see here. Yeah, this was something I found last week. Thought it was kind of interesting, and it may be something that we start to get into. As I know, one of the things that we're trying to maybe talk about is some of the authentication capabilities in Blazor. And when we're doing authentication, one of those identity providers that you can connect your application up to is something we have in Azure called Entra External ID. Basically what we used to call Azure B2C, so that ability to bring other social identities like your Microsoft account or a Google account and bring those into your application. And the Entra external capabilities basically wraps all that up in one set of commands that you can call to, and it goes out to the identity providers and does the authentication mechanism for you. Long story around all of that is that was a lot of setting those up, was a lot of moving things around inside of the Azure portal and being able to go back and forth between your code and your and the portal itself. So in this case here, there's actually now a plugin or an extension for Visual Studio Code that lets you connect up to Entra External ID and not have to leave the IDE to go ahead and make some of those configuration settings and do some of the setup. So this, if you think about some of the other things like GitHub Copilot, right? It's meant to keep you in the IDE, not have you jump and switch context. And this is this extension kind of goes along those same lines here. So being able to make it easy as a developer to create and wire up your connection to Entra External, which again is what we're used to be called Azure AD B2C, or your social identities, and this is a way to kind of bring that all together in one interface essentially for you, right where your code is. So if that's something you're working on, I'd love to hear about it in the chat, but certainly let us know what you think about that, or if you're watching in the future as well. Cool. So with that, we have some people joining us here. Good morning, Tailspin 2019. Welcome from the UK. Love it. Watching us from across the pond, as it were. Happy to have you here. And I'm not sure if you've shifted to daylight savings yet, and whether that makes it easier for you to watch at this time or more complicated. But happy you're watching nonetheless. And I'd love to see you in the chat there. So So with that, let's drop out of here, and I'm going to go back into our application. This is, for those who may not have seen it before, we'll run through it real quick here. This application is essentially a way of bringing generative AI into a Blazor application. So we've got a number of Blazor components. We've got connections to our Azure OpenAI service behind the scenes. And one of the first things that service does is it brings us back a list of questions. So basically we've asked it, hey, I want to create an image, create some questions for me that I can use to define what that image should look like. So let's do something in pastels. We'll do buildings. We'll make a cartoon. We'll make it kind of rough, and we'll call it background in space. There we go. So providing all of those answers, basically wrapping that up, and then providing that over to our generative AI service and say, based on these responses or this collection of words, go create a prompt that will then we can use to generate an image. So you can see the prompt that got created here: pastel colored cartoon image of a group of rough and abstract buildings in a vast futuristic space. So it took a little creativity around how it filled the text around the words that we chosen and you can see them all listed there. Pastel, buildings, cartoon, rough, and space are all listed in that prompt there, and we get an interesting picture like that. And that's pretty cool. But the problem is that right now I've got no way to save this other than right-clicking and saving it locally. So we want to persist this, and there's some other ideas for what we want to do with this, with those images as they come across, and we collect them. So let's dive into how we might go ahead and start to wire some of that up. So we'll stop this here, and this is essentially our image control. When that little area on the page there where we went ahead and clicked submit, that's what goes off and takes the answer to the questions and basically collects them here as a collection of values, comma separated values, and then calls out to semantic kernel to talk to the AI and get our prompt. And semantic kernel, if you haven't seen that before, that is essentially it's a package that you can add to your application. C# Node and Python is in preview at this point, but it gives you the ability to, whatever coding of those languages that you're using, can bring that framework in and then be able to essentially abstract out the calls that are needed to make that connection to that service. So we're basically, providing, the location of the service and the endpoint and the key, but that's pretty much all I need to do. From there on, I just can call in the semantic kernel, and it's able to handle a lot of the more complex workings of talking to large language model services, whether it's Azure OpenAI or other services you might want to bring in. It also abstracts it away from you, because if you want to switch services or bring in a different service in the future, you can do that as well. So we get our prompt, and then we get our image, and then it's at this point here, once we have the image, that we want to be able to put that aside and make it available for viewing later. So once we have that image back, we get essentially a URL that comes back from the service, and then right now we're posting that in the image tag on the page there. So once we have that image, we want to be able to take that and use that to store our content. So let's see, we want to let's just split this out for right now, because we want this to go off and run on its own, because I want to be able to turn the image but have it saved to the blob storage in the background there. So if we did, let's see, right, where we pass in that's awesome. It's got to be, I don't want to get rid of that. Let's see. All right, we'll just let that go. We'll create it manually. So we'll come down here. We'll do private. I know we're going to have a sync inside of here as well. I'm going to call the save image to Blob. And we're going to take in a string, which is our image URL. Yeah, we don't need to name it that far. Okay. And then from here, we want to connect to our Blob storage and save the image. All right, let's see what comes back. Blob storage with that. Well, there should be. We could do that. Let's see how much Copilot helps us here. Now it is giving a little bit of a issue with the Blob service. Yeah, and I'm not getting. Let's see if I turn this off for a minute here. If that helps. No, I'm still not getting TeleSense, which I was looking for. Because I know the Blob service takes. See if that's enough. And maybe that's not the right bits. Let's see. Yeah, this is one of those things where the best thing to look at is to go and look at the documentation. So what we want to do is upload a blob with .NET. And specifically, we want to upload a stream. Yeah, blob client container. So we got our container client, and then we get our blob client, and then from our blob client, we're able to go ahead and do the writing into that. So that should work. I think the other thing we could do is okay. So that looks pretty promising. So much like we saw in the docs, we want our client, and then we're going to create our blob container client, and then create our blob client, and then we should be in a pretty good space. So let's try and go down that path. If I want to copy all of that because it's already sitting inside of a message, but if we take this and let's just copy those pieces. Cool. So a connection string. So where do we get the connection string from? Well, we do have we do have in our program.cs yes, so we have blob storage settings that I've previously set up, so we don't get to see the connection string or any of the keys or anything like that. All of that is sitting in our secrets.json behind the scenes, but I do have that wired up and available inside of the Azure Blob storage settings. So what I can do is go back to the component, much like we did with the Azure OpenAI settings. We can inject those here. Azure Blob settings, and we're going to call this quite appropriately Blob settings. And what that gives us is the ability to come down here and now do Blob settings dot. There we go. And we got a connection string, which is what we need here to complete our Blob service client. And then come down here for this one to complete our, I believe it's a container name we need here. Yes, so it's the string that is our container name. So in Blob storage, we need to have essentially a mechanism for inside of Blob storage. We need to have, let me see the right way to say this, basically a container. So in Azure, we go ahead and create our Blob storage account, and then inside of a storage account, you can do blobs, you can do tables, you can do queues, you can do, what am I missing? File storage. You have those all available to you in every storage account. So we're going to say in the Blob side of things, we want to create a container that will hold our blobs in. And in this case, we already have named it. I think it's DallE images. I think it's what it's called up there. Doesn't matter. The setting's already been saved, and we just are pulling it in at runtime into this particular object. So all of that is good. It's going to ensure that the container exists. Okay, that should be fine. I think the thing we want to do here is image. Provide an image name based on the current date and time. What I want to do is, I don't want to go into some crazy naming collision pieces. So what I'm going to do is basically use a value that should be kind of unique without going crazy and making it GUID, just basing it off date and time. I don't think it's going to have a date and time all the way down to the seconds. So I don't think it's going to have anything more complex than, where it might be used more than that, essentially. So let's see. So we could do that. So essentially what this is here is, well, what's the name of the file that we want to put in place? So let's try and do this. I want date time .utc now, and I want to do it to string, but I want to format this, and I'm pretty sure that I can just basically, put the string format right in there. And I want that format to be interesting. So there's a number of individual formats in here. All right, let's do this though, because I think I can just basically spell it out myself. I can do YY, which is the year, month, day, and then That's interesting. Let's see what that happened. All right. Let me see. Dun, dun. There should be, because the way the letters stand, are capital or not capital, makes a difference in how, essentially in how it looks at those. Let me see if we can come up with. Let's see if we can see what's doing here. Oh, okay. Sorry, Scream lost connectivity over there. Let's see. So, got our image. That's interesting. So why is... Why are we getting all this weirdness? That's interesting. Wow. Now it's... I know when that's wrong. That should be that. Does not exist in the current context. Sure it does. It's right there. Well, it's not like in any of those. Well, the question states there. Oh, looks like there's an extra. That's... I'm not sure why that's happening. Let's see. Put this back. This all that's fine now. Let's do this. Let's just save it. any suggestions either. That's the problem. That's really bizarre. All right, what if we, since that seems to be which is working its way back up the stack. I am up for, if you're in the chat and you have comments on where we might look here, I am up for any suggestions. I would usually go to Chris at this point, but unfortunately, he's not able to join us today. So, and this is all stuff that we had working before, so I'm not sure why all of a sudden it's causing an issue, because this is kind of didn't change any of those. Let's see. Oh, no, that should be right. We need the code block in there with the curly braces around it. Yeah, I mean, that's normal. There's got to be something on the interactive server bit that we are doing. Has to be that, because that's what it's rolling all the way back up to. So, closing bracket after the image file name. That causes that ripple effect all the way up through there. You're right. It's a good catch, Tailspin. That was it was missing, but I can't see that causing issue all the way back up. We've got her using. Yeah, we also need to kind of finish that out. Also want to make this there we go. So we got essentially the name of it as the date time string, and then an image, and then PNG. So we have basically have it setting fully defined. No, that's not right. That's no. No, it was a good try, but I don't think that's the underlying reason there. Something's not right. Let's see what happens. Private component render mode attribute does not exist in this type. And that's interesting. It's in the components image generation razor. Yeah. I did see that as well, and it did look like all of them went away, but it's, oops, sorry. Don't pin that. Let's try that again and make sure, because there is some of that happens. So if I cut this, oh, well. So yes, there should be that. Okay. Thank you, Tailspin. That did it. I'm not sure why I thought that went, because I did get rid of it at one point. I thought it was overkill. But, all right. My bad. I slowed us down a bit there. Let's see. But thank you, Tailspin. Awesome recovery. Yes, we've all been there, but how many times have we done it live? It's a little different when you're in your cube and doing it. So, but thank you. This is, appreciate the pair programming there, Tailspin. All right. So now that we've got save blob, it looks like we're all lining up here. This is good. We do want to have this be awaited. Okay. So we've got that going. We're going to wait that. And yeah, that should basically drop it into our stream. There is something else. Let's see. So there is something else to be able to get done here as well. So we can. Why don't we just try it and see how it goes? So if I go to let's open up a new Edge window here and do portal.azure.com. And inside of here, this is my Azure portal. And if we look at storage accounts, I've got, I believe it's this one here. And then I've got a blob service. And then inside of our blob service, we have containers. Yep, there's our DallE images containers. If we go into the storage browser, we can actually, in the portal here, see the images. You can see I've been saving a bunch of stuff out here. I've got some things working a little bit ago. Hopefully that is still that same. Oh, it's little s's. Okay, I'll have to switch that because this is kind of, should be able to see this in that capital S's don't work. It's the small S's that are needed. So we'll change that real quick before we do it. But we'll get a couple of images in here because the other thing I want to see if we can add is also the metadata as well. So let's drop out of that. We'll swap this over. And let's give it a test run. So let's go with yellow. Let's make some food. Let's have a soft texture. Minimalist. There we go. And yeah, we have to see some way how to not have it do this, because have it say background on your background image, it's not going to know what that means, because all it's going to see is the word yes. Because when we pass it over, we're just passing over the collection of answers. It might be, maybe to refine this in the future, we go ahead and do something where we include not only the name or the answer, but also the category that we've kind of given here, and include that in the prompt. We can play around with that and see. So, but for right now, we're just going to kick that off. Interesting. Did we not through an error? Okay, hang on. We don't have any. Let's do this. Surround with is not currently available. Lovely. All right, try again. So we'll do a try. Catch with exceptions. Let's take this. And let's use the alt with the arrows. We'll bring all that down. Save that because that should be there afterwards. We don't. We could put that in the finally, but I'm not gonna go nuts. Let's put that outside of there. Let's take all this, format it a little bit, and now at least we've got that there that we can catch it. In case it's there, but it's probably here because it's the stuff we just added. Double tab when we get that. EX for those. Let's do the same thing and take this and alt arrow down. And that's fine because this all gets indented, and we're back to where we should be, right? So we've got a couple of exception catches here that we can look and see how it goes. Let's run that again. So now we have our questions. And it worked. Beautiful. So we have a laptop, rectangle, sand, and surreal. We get that interesting image. And I think what we want to see, what time is 8:27. So I think that's 4 hours. It'll be 12:27. But the date should be unique because I think it's first time writing into here. So let's look at our let's look at our images. Let's do a refresh. 3:19. There we go. 12:07:06, and I think we can download that image. Let's open it. Nice. So that's basically saving our file to Blob storage. Cool. So we've got a way to basically persist those images and be able to keep them around a little longer. I like the naming convention that we have on this, in that it should be unique with the year, the month, the day, the time, dash image. So we should be able to keep these on there and be able to pull them back. The one thing that I also want to include inside of here, and we'll see if we can get this wrapped up, is, let's stop this. There's the ability inside of Blob storage to be able to store metadata along with our image. So if we look here, I think, can I go, doesn't show it here, but I think if I go to the properties, yeah, if there was metadata here, we would have, the key and the value essentially stored inside of alongside the image, right? So not inside the image, but alongside it. So we've got the ability to keep and persist that data here as well. What I am doing in the application is I have a state object, and remember we did some state object back when we were collecting all of the responses as people were answering the questions. What I'm doing here is setting up a very similar object. It is also a dictionary object, which, for metadata makes perfect sense because it's just a key and a value. Both are strings. And then I have 3 keys that I am focused on. One that is the LLM question. So what did I get back from the large language model when it provided a list of questions? And then the responses. So essentially I can recreate what it was that the person who completed the work in the app was able to do. I can kind of recapture that information. And then also, finally, what's the image prompt? So once the answers were generated from the questions, we sent that over to a generative AI model to create that prompt that would then go off to DallE and create the image. I want to persist that because I want to be able to look at it and say this image, and almost like have something that shows all of the images that maybe over the course of a day that get created, and then be able to flip them over or have something overlays on them that says, well, this was the prompt that created that image. That's the goal. We'll get there. Before we can get there, though, we've got to persist the metadata into the blob storage. So that's our next challenge. So again, we've got this. We're essentially keeping the state of the image metadata, and then that gets set in a couple places along the way. So if we look at our questions component, that's doing the categories. We don't do it here. We do it in 2 places. If we look at home razor, that's right. No, we do it in here. There were 2 spots. I thought home was the first one it's probably not in home. It is probably on, not there, question service, I think. Unless this is, oh no, it got commented out. So as you can tell, because there's some images and there's already some things set up here, I was trying to capture the images and metadata. So ran into some issues with some of the metadata that I'm hoping we can get past here, given the success we had with getting the image stored that way. So let's go down here. So for the questions, we're storing it here on the home page once we get them back from the semantic kernel component. Right now that's commented out. I want to see if we can get one set of key values in the system to be able to use that. And I think the other place is the other place should be here, and I think the other place for it should be here. We just haven't wired that up yet. So in order to wire that up, we need to get and inject a image metadata state object, and that probably should be, no, that should be fine that way. And then this is, so we have our metadata state object. So now I can go down to, we get the, this is where we get the CSV, and we turn it into, from there, we want to just basically capture this. So we're going to do, it's not image, it is metadata state dot add or update metadata, right? Because if we're replacing it, that's fine, but if not, then we want to be able to get that back again. And then image metadata values. So what I did was I basically have an object or a class that is my metadata values. In this case, it's dropping in the text. So this value will get replaced with this text, which really is just responses CSV. So I've got a way of defining it once, but using that key over and over again inside of wherever I need to reference it, essentially. Hey, good morning or good day there, Illuminati. Yeah, so what are we working on? So we're actually trying to, if you've seen a couple of the streams that we've done over the last week or so, we're working on our Hello DallE app, and I'm basically taking the image and dropping it into Blob storage. That is that's the plan. So we've already got it into Blob storage. The thing I don't have though is I don't have that's funny. Yeah, it's calm, but I'm nervous under the covers here, right? It's like a duck. Thank you for that. Yeah, I love my setup here and the really cool mic that we have in place. So let's see. We got about 25 minutes to see if we can get this this part wired up. So basically all I'm doing is I'm adding the metadata. In this case, it's going to be the CSV values here, but then I'm also going to come down here and set it for the image metadata values. Yep. Image prompt, and then this is going to be the prompt for image. Cool. All right. So what that should give us is at the end of this, as we go through this, because when we click submit, we'll actually get the values, get the metadata object, and add that into those two values for the metadata. And then down here, we want to change this object here, or the way that we do the upload. It's very easy to do an upload async, right? Because we've got our object there, and we can basically bring that up. But what I want to do is provide a little more capability inside of there. So not only am I sending my stream object, but I'm also going to send a new blob upload options. Right, and there we go, using Azure Storage Blobs models. So what does that mean? So what we're saying is we're not just going to upload the blob. We actually want to refine some of the options that are available to us when we do the uploading. And this is where the documentation is really helpful, because not only does it tell us about our upload options for uploading a blob, but we can see the underlying properties that are in there. So something like if we wanted to set, for whatever reason, the HTTP headers, or in this case, we want to actually add optional custom metadata for when this blob gets sent up there. So let's go back to our code. So we know inside of this object that we can define metadata, and our metadata is essentially the key that, or the dictionary object that we're working on. So metadata state, and sorry, we don't want to do a semicolon. We want to put a comma in there and keep that in place. So why is that? Cannot implicitly convert. That's interesting. So it doesn't know. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, it's not that. It's actually the metadata object itself. Okay, because the metadata state is the, if we go back to here, metadata state is the class that we're storing our state in, but inside of there is a metadata property that has our dictionary. That's what we want to make sure we bind to. Okay, that helps a lot. I think the other thing that we wanted to include was, based on some stuff that I had seen before, I want to make sure that we have information about the size of the upload, so that because when it seems that when you're putting, there we go, that's what we want. Based on experience, it seems that when you kind of start to go down the path of modifying what your options are, there's some things that don't carry over when you do the upload. And it looks like the length is one of those things that's kind of important when you're uploading the blob. So you know kind of where your how much size needs to be allocated and stuff like that. So in this case, I need to include that here. Maximum transfer size, and for that we're going to do this. And length. I'm going to make that into the stream dot length. I think that's the only thing we need to put in the transfer options. So let's try that this time and see what we get. Yeah. I mean, hopefully it all runs because it's all part of the same call, so that's could be good. Let's see. Save this. Let's run it. Car in the ocean, pop art, playful, grainy, submit. So who is unhandled? That's interesting because everything should be caught. Let's try that again. While we wait, great question. So Tailspin, yes. So the question themselves are actually generated, although they are actually generated from the large language model up in the Azure OpenAI service. I think we're just using GPT 3.5 Turbo Instruct because we're doing it as a completion. It's not like we're having a chat with the GPT. We're basically saying, and I can show you how we define it. It is semantic kernel text completion service. That's the first one we use. So essentially, this is what we're asking it: generate. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's the text prompt. See, it's semantic kernel question. Yeah, question service. This one. So this is where we generate the questions. So it's a little more complex than that, because what we're doing is we're actually telling it to generate the JSON object that creates the collection of questions and answers. And we give it some things that it shouldn't do, right? The collection, or things it should do, collection should contain at least 5 questions. Each question should have 4 to 5 choices, and each choice is 1 or 2 words. Don't include questions that ask about image size. We also say don't ask questions, don't output the questions as a numbered list. Only respond with a JSON object. So we do tell it a couple times what it needs to do and things it shouldn't do. Just like you're talking to a young child, sometimes you have to say it a couple times in a couple different ways for them to fully understand and get the message. But in the end, we're saying all responses will be in the following JSON format, and that's important because we have a question category, we have a question text, we have a collection of answers with an answer text, and that's needed because in our what is it? Is our question view, not questions, question view model, those map to our properties. So we can take the JSON deserializer and turn that into an object. So that's why it's important that the questions and answers really, or the properties match what we have here. And then I've got a bit of retry logic that if it tries it once and it fails, it will try and do it again and try and get those questions back. One of the things that I do want to show is where we have our list of questions. I think I still have this up and running. Our list of questions here, I also want to show, well, what was the JSON text that kind of came back to kind of reinforce that this isn't canned. We're not making this up on the fly, or we are making this up on the fly. It's not a canned set of questions. I would like them to be a little more random. They seem to a little bit consistent with color in an object and what colors and objects are really inside of there. So I might play around with that prompt to see if there's ways that we could make it a little more random in not only the questions but also the answers. Yeah, thanks. And that's talking about the multiple levels of generation. That's kind of one of the things that I like talking about this as well, because it's generative AI, but not through a chat, right? So we're using generative AI is under the covers. It's basically just being surfaced up through the interface that we've got here, through the questions that are being prompted and the image that gets generated, and not because we're having a conversation with the AI. So yeah, I think that's what makes it a little bit unique as well, and I think in some extents where things are going. So let's reload that. What I'm going to do is for this one, because it seems to be hitting something and not catching the error. So let's do this. I'm just going to jump into here because I think that's where the issue is. It's going to be on the save to blob. It's probably in this part here because that's really all we've changed. But let's just be safe and, well, yeah, that's fine. We can do that. So let's go back to here. Let's pick a bunch of responses. It'll take a few seconds for this to pop. Okay, it's trying to save our image back to blob, which is fine. That makes sense. Make sure we go through, dive into this. Yes, that's fine. work our way through all the usings to get to our stream, to get to our stream length. So we do have a content length here, which is good. So that did work out well. And then here, we're going to, interesting. So we do have an exception going on. Let's see. Let's look at the view details on that. Here we go. View. Server failed to authenticate the request. Make sure the value of the authorization header is formed correctly. Server failed to authenticate the request. Make sure the value of the authorization header is formed correctly, including the signature. Yeah, we don't set any of that. Just copy this for later. It's failing, and it failed once we got to clear out the chat on this one. Not calling. Calling is probably the wrong thing. When... What? Calling in... Yeah, I was not having fun with the still debug mode. Let's see. Yeah, it's got the values here. You can see, oh. Interesting. In doing that, it's actually putting them in the metadata of it's putting them in, it looks like it's putting them in the header as xms-metadata meta.-image prompt and -responsive CSV. Interesting. There are restricted values for metadata. then you could URL encode them. Kind of winding down the wire here, and not sure we're going to be able to get through this before I gotta sign off. But this is an interesting problem to kind of run through. So nearest I could tell, it looks like it's something in the, because it's complaining about the authentication header, that it must not be able to see what it needs to from the authentication side because of this extra metadata not being in the right format. That sounds like, that's kind of how I'm guessing it, because the authentication works if we don't include metadata, right? If we just basically send it up as is. And maybe what we'll try and do is see if I can make a simpler version of the metadata and save that instead in the short term. But it's interesting. So yeah. So yeah. So two things. One, I think we're gotten as far as I can get to today on the code here, but so I'm going to have to dig into that error and find out why that's happening. But that's maybe we can pick that up in a future show. I think Thursday I'll be on my own again, so maybe we'll be picking it back up on Thursday to kind of see how that runs. I do want to. Interesting question from Illuminati there, that being in high school and learning programming and, you know, with AI taking over, I think we will always need developers and programmers and people who understand how to write code. That's not going away. I think maybe some of the level of detail with which you might need to understand the nuances of a language or something like that, or might be a little different. If you see here, even with what, you know, I've got my Copilot here helping me along to try and debug what's going on, and even then I'm still hitting a wall that I've got as a developer. Go into the docs or go in and find some different avenues of research and be able to kind of come up with that myself. So it's and I think Chris, who's joined me in the chat world, you know, I think that's a pretty on comment. You know, there certainly is, you know, some really cool stuff that AI can do, but it's, you know, its ability to go off and replace what we do as programmers, or pretty much at this point what we do in almost any field, is I guess overrated is probably the best way to put it, right? So yes, I think we're, you know, in the foreseeable future, we still need people who understand how to write code. Having Copilot is not going to, you know, doesn't mean that anybody can write code. It means that it can make it easier to learn a new language or to learn some new features of a language, because you've got someone kind of there helping you along the path. So I think, I think what kind of sums it up is, you know, Tailspin's advice: if you enjoy it, don't quit, right? You always want to find something to do in your, you know, in your day job that you enjoy. Because if you can get somebody to pay you to do something you enjoy, well, what better thing is there to do with your time than that? So I think, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say there's, you know, we're a long way off from, if at all, of AI having that kind of capability to do that. So yeah, I mean, if you enjoy programming, and I guess that's why you're watching too, definitely stick with it. And you know, there's always the capability to have AI help you along the way or help you learn something new, and I think that's the important part. So yeah, so here we are. We're just about top of the hour here in the coming up on stand-up time, as it were, for us here in the East Coast. I appreciate folks joining me in the chat room. So thanks for Tailspin and Illuminati for chiming in, helping me get through a couple of the errors that we found. And it's always good to have a voice of folks in the chat room, and just to be able to know that I'm not doing this on my own, which is good. And with that, if you're watching in the future, leave a comment in the video down below. All the videos are up on YouTube/The Dev Talk Show. And looking forward to, I think Chris and I are going to try and do one for tomorrow, hopefully together this time. And we'll have some cool stuff that we're going to bring to that conversation. Probably not this. We're going to go off in a little different direction, but then come back on Thursday. And I think we're going to come back and talk about our DallE app. So with that, I'll sign off. Rich Ross, hoping you have a great day, and look forward to seeing you again on the Dev Talk Show.